So let's go over a quick hidden expense that came into the project. This sensor right here, I have another video with all the part numbers on it and everything. It's the same one that's on the intake, in case you're wondering, and I tried aftermarket ones and they didn't work. So anyway, I broke this off my big intercooler when I sold it the other day. So I needed a new screw right here and a new sensor. And after tax, that ran me $150 out the door for both. $70 for everything, for the axle nuts, the flywheel bolts, and 2 gallons of antifreeze concentrate. It's the new yellow stuff, so not terrible. All right, so today we're taking off the wiring harness. You can see there's a couple connections down by the turbo. We're just gonna pop all these connectors off. Nothing too crazy, but we're just gonna work our way down this wiring harness and disconnect everything all the way up until we get down here. And then we marked everything and where it goes with blue tape. So that way we know, what goes back where. All right, I'm taking this line off the oil cooler right here, and it traces all the way from the oil cooler up to here and then into this. And then I'm just making sure I have the angle pretty close so when we go back, we can line that all up. So I'm gonna take that whole coolant hose off right now. Okay, so for all these plugs plugged into the intake manifold down here, a little bit of a pain to get off, but all you gotta know is you gotta pull this backside off right here. So this will pop out. So usually it's clamped in there, which of course now it won't do, probably because it has to be sitting on the line. Once you pull the backside out though, it's just a push button on this side. So this pushes in nice and hard and then the line will pop right out. So pull this. All right, so this little connector plugged in right under here. You can see that better for orientation. Same thing, you just gotta push this in really hard. Sometimes it doesn't wanna go, so I put a nice wide flathead in there and rocked it back a little bit so it actually flared open like that, popped right out. So when I'm following it up to this one, this little connector right here, you just gotta push this pin in and then the plug will come right out, just like that. A little weird, but take your time with these connectors, don't break them, because they're a pain to repin and deal with that. All right, so there's one little plug right here that's giving me a little grief. It's just a push plug. I'm gonna disconnect this hose and let that hang for now, and then we're gonna get after the turbo connection. So basically, there's a ground right here coming off this wiring harness. Looks like it's just stuck on here, so we'll pop that loose, and then it runs to all these air lines, it looks like. So we've got this little controller thing here, so I'll probably mark all of these. This is for the turbo inlet right here, so I'll mark that line turbo inlet, and I'll mark this line. Is that my wastegate? Yeah, it looks like it, I think. Where's the, yeah, that's my wastegate right here. So I'll mark this one wastegate. Okay, so as we travel down the harness, I came to this piece right here, which goes on the, I think this is the starter right here. Anyway, you gotta take these 3 bolts out. Sorry for the shaky work. To get this black thing off, there's 2 13 mils right here, 1, 2. And a 10 mil right here, and I kind of jacked this up trying to pull it out, but it looks like the wires are still good, and we might need a starter if it's not. So we'll take another look at that, and I'll try to pop that thing back in. I'm gonna take the belt off next because I decided to remove the alternator so I get a little better room down there to work on stuff. And so you just go 15 mil, and it's just gonna go to the left there, and then we're gonna pop it off. And then for the sake of the video, you can kind of see where that belt's gonna go back on once everything is replaced on the new motor, so that'll be helpful for us in a little bit. Okay, so to get the alternator out, there are 3 bolts on here, so it sits up in here. This one rides on this little thingy. The bolts all look the same, except this one has more thread on it right here, and this one is the one that was in this hole right here, and the other 2 look exactly the same. For the bolts on here, you also need to take this strap off right here. That's what actually puts power to your alternator here, and that's a 13 millimeter, and these other 3 are 10 millimeter. I'll also warn you, there's a plug on the bottom of the alternator here, so I actually just used a screwdriver to help me push this in a little bit. All right, to get the oil cooler off, there's one plug on the bottom right here. It's kind of annoying because you got to pinch your finger in there, so I actually took these 4 bolts out first. 4 10 mil bolts, easy to get to once you're at this point. You can see them easy right there. So once you get those out, you can swing this down and then pop this plug off easy, but without them off, it's a pain. I've been just unplugging stuff and making sure I mark where it goes. If it's something really tricky, like this is the only massive plug I have right here, I know it's gonna go to this one. And I'm gonna clean all these plugs out with QD spray as we put it all back together and put dielectric grease in them. Okay, so I'm just popping the feed and return line pieces off right here, so you can see this part actually spins to take this off. So I actually took this little turny thing off and left this part in the block and then took it off and reattached. Okay, so rotating back around to the starter, there's a little shield right here that has two 10 mil bolts or nuts on it, and then that comes right off, and then two 13 millimeter bolts that are going to come out next, and then hopefully that should be all we need to pop the starter out. And that's after we already took this off the way for the wiring harness earlier. And then when you're taking the oil or the turbo off, make sure you get the oil feed line off of that. It's two 8 mil bolts. They come right out, and then the oil feed will come off. And now we have the big turbo on the floor there. Waiting to see, check it out, see if it's okay. It doesn't have a lot of turbo shaft play. I looked up these GTX turbos, and they have a little bit brand new, and it feels about and looks about the same as that. It's not alarming, and it looks in pretty good condition. But let's get this starter out and keep moving. Okay, so just like that, those two 13 mil bolts were all that was holding it in. And this won't fall out right away because it's splined into the transmission, basically. So if you're ever pulling your transmission, you do have to remove your starter. So we're gonna set that over here by the alternator. And you'll see we've got our oil cooler, starter, alternator. We're getting pretty close, guys. A few other things that might need to come over. Maybe this mount. I haven't looked at the other one to see if it's on there. Some sensors. We have extras right here if we need them. But yeah, we're looking good. All right, so at this point, I took the intake manifold off. It's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bolts. I had to take, to get to this one, I actually had to take the belt tensioner off. You know, so I'm just going through and making sure that all that same stuff is still there. That's plugged in. You know, I've got all the same plugs before I get crazy and start throwing all the accessories back on. But yeah, it's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm just checking everything. All right, so I put the alternator back on, so you can see tensioner, just go lefty-loosey with a 15 mil. It'll turn all the way over to the left, and it'll give you room to get this belt back on. So this goes on the inside track of the crank there, so that you have room for the AC condenser belt or AC compressor belt later on, which we had to cut to get off because it was so tight. But you can see the flow of it right here. Goes out and around the alternator, pinches up between these two, comes around the tensioner on the top. Pretty easy. All right, so now we're taking the trans bolts. I'm gonna loosen them right now because my buddy's not here. And there are these bolts up here that you wanna take out. They're 13 mils. Make sure you remember which one goes where. You can really jack stuff up because I know there are different lengths for these bolts here. So we're gonna loosen them but not take them out. And then as we take them out, we're gonna mark them all, you know, with Sharpie, a little 1, 2, 3. Pick a spot to start with. I'll probably start with this bolt as 1, and then 2 will be here. And I'm just gonna go all the way around and make sure I mark them. Ghosts. Okay, so now we're removing the transmission. We got all the bolts out. We put them in a line up there, which we then dropped on the floor. So anyway, we'll show you how they go in. But Nate was using a dead blow to just kind of whack the transmission around a little bit to break it loose. Yep, right on that corner down there. And you can see that it is indeed starting to spread right here. So the next thing we're gonna do is use a little crowbar here to kind of wiggle it out and go evenly across. If you get one side really far, it'll get hung up on the little things it sits on. And actually, yeah, it looks like you're wiggling it right out. All right, I'm gonna put this down. Okay, so we got the trans out. We just wiggled it right out. And now you can see the clutches right here. And then we're gonna take it out star pattern with the bolts. So, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or whatever. And just loosen them a little bit each time because like Nate was just saying, you can bend those fingers on the clutch right here.
Out. If there's no pressure and a lot of pressure, it'll like distort it.
Yeah, so we don't want to bend all this stuff up. All right, clutch is out on the chair. Nice and clean. It actually looks really good, to be totally honest. So next step, so there's 6 little bolts on that that we took out on the pressure plate. Clutch comes with it, so make sure you don't drop that. And then there are 6 bolts here on the flywheel. They're just those like star tip or Torx bits. So we're gonna start breaking those loose. This is hard because the whole thing wants to spin. Okay, so Ford has a tool to hold this flywheel in place. We made up our own. You put that bolt back in right here, stick that in there, and it'll hold it right in place. And I just broke them all loose with the breaker bar down here, which you will need. And it's a T55 Torx bolt, and now that they're broke loose, I can just use a regular ratchet here to get them the rest of the way out while Nate holds them. But all in all, not that hard.
Bolt, there's really not that much tension on this.
Yeah, no, there's not.
It doesn't take much to stop it.
No, it's just to hold it in place. So it is a good little sneaky way to do it. But yeah, everything looks pretty good. It does look like the clutch was probably done recently because there's not much dust in here. Okay, so we're continuing surgery. We're taking the transducer.
Flex plate.
I don't know what automatic stuff is. That's a flex plate. It's like a flywheel, but it's stupid because it's automatic. And yes, I'm wearing knee pads. And it's just a 19 mil. We're doing the same thing. He's going to put that little bolt right in here and then hold it with a little crowbar. And I'm going to break these suckers loose and then we'll get them out. And then we're going to transplant the pressure plate, not this thing, which is
flywheel pressure plate and
clutch. Yeah.
Clutch
but what's
assembly under.
That's a transducer. What is it?
It's a flex plate.
It's a flex plate. That's stupid. Flywheel, flex plate. Which one sounds better? Flywheel. It's like flywheel fishing.
That's because manuals are better.
Yeah. Save the manual and I'm done. So we have the new, or the old flywheel on now. You need to make sure you level up all 3 layers of this. I was sitting here trying to get the bolts in and couldn't, and then now I realized that you actually have to line up the holes inside there. You can see the threads. So make sure those are all lined up before you try to jam screws in there, because I wasn't getting crazy with it, but I'm glad Nate pointed that out, because you live and learn. So we're going to finger tighten all those up, and then we'll give you the torque specs. All right, so now we got them snugged up just a little bit. We're going to go 50 Newton meters in a star pattern, 80 Newton meters in a star pattern, and what was it, 112? In a star pattern. If you want the workshop manual for this, please leave a comment with like your email address if you're comfortable with that. If not, we'll find a way to get in contact. But there is if you Google Focus ST Workshop Manual, there is a link on the forum to getting that in a OneDrive. So if you make a OneDrive login, you can get that easy. Okay, so we cleaned the flywheel, the flywheel surface off just with some brake clean. Just make sure you wipe that off first to get any contaminants off there from messing with it. And then we put the clutch pad in here. And this alignment tool is on Amazon. I can throw a link in if I remember. But yeah, it's just Amazon. I looked up Focus ST alignment tool. It doesn't work for the Fiesta ST for some reason, but it works fine for the Focus. So now that we have that on, we're going to put on the pressure plate as well. And I'm assuming, yeah, after we're going to wipe this off too and make sure it's nice and clean. But all in all, a couple of little hot spots on here, but nothing bad. It doesn't look like super old, actually. It looks pretty new.
No big grooves or glazing, really.
Yeah, and it's not like blue like the RS one was from me roasting it like a moron all the time. So yeah, it looks pretty good. Okay, so you can see these pins right here. There's 3 of them that hold this pressure plate on, and you want to make sure you line them up for where they actually go, which is where these slots are right here. That's a good way to check. Is there's these kind of square slots seem to line up with them. And then just make sure you have your alignment tool still in there, which we do. So we're going to finger tighten all these little screws in to hold them in place. So for the flywheel bolts, you go 22 Newton meters and then 29 Newton meters, which we just looked up the torque specs to convert that to foot-pounds because it was easier for our little American brains. And Laura's out here helping. Torque spec. You having fun?
Lots.
All right, so you're definitely going to want 2 people to put the trans back on, but we got it. What I would recommend doing is once you get it on, there's a pin right here. We put this bolt in first, just hand threaded it. I hand threaded a couple up top while Nate was holding it on the other side. And then this top right bolt here, this is one of the long ones, the 2 really long ones. These 2 are really long, and then the one with the stud sticking out the back goes down here. Once you get these 2 in, it'll suck it into the little dowels that hold everything in place, and then you don't have to hold it anymore. And you can just put the rest of the bolts in. So we're gonna put the rest of the bolts back in and then slap the harness on. All right, so we ended up putting a new starter on. It's about 120 bucks after the core charge from O'Reilly's, which is fine. 2 13 mil bolts right here. I'm just leaving these on the end for now. There's a little bracket that goes on there. We're just painting it black quick to clean it up. So that's drying outside, just using some random paint. All right, so the turbo is mounted back on now. We've got, I can't remember what all lines are which. We still have to put the drain tube back in all the way. We forgot to flip that drain all the way around. by the way. But we got all those fittings back in with copper washers. And then we just plop the wiring harness on top. A good way to remember where these go is, again, I labeled them all, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then there's these little clips right here that stick onto the bolts, those little placeholders kind of. So that's a really nice way. And then like right here, clips on right here, that's what that's for. So that's just a good way to get started. So we're just going to go around plugging everything in. We're using QD electronic cleaner to spray out all the plugs. Make sure they're dry before you plug them in. And then we're going to put dielectric grease on all the plugs, and just a little bit. You don't have to get crazy, but just get one of these. It'll save you money versus those little packets, and it'll last forever. I've had that for years, and it's like still full. So yeah, we're just going to keep going with plugging stuff in, and I'll try to walk through it as we go.